Good morning, good morning. So nice to sort of see so many of you. The lights are a little blinding. I always kind of hesitate when I say yes to something because you never know what precedes you. And obviously that great conversation about sort of travel and beyond, and then the beautiful music makes me feel like I'm going to be a little bit of a Debbie Downer because I'm talking about immigration. Although I do think that there's like a through line given the beautiful song, you know, Please Won't You Be My Neighbor, because I do think that the work of welcome that we do is so much that. So let me start by saying, as you heard, my name is Krish Vignarajah. I serve as president and CEO of Global Refuge. We are one of the nation's largest nonprofits serving refugees, unaccompanied children, and other immigrants. I think many of you know, at least from some of the whoops, that Global Refuge, which is the new Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, was founded as a Lutheran ministry more than 80 years ago. So being in a room full of people shaping the next generation of ELC leaders really does feel like a family reunion. I want to begin by just acknowledging the heaviness of this moment. I know so many of you traveled from all over the country, but I also know that in particular so many of you are coming from Minnesota. When I see images of the violence in Minnesota and elsewhere, I can barely recognize my own country. I'm sure that that sentiment is shared. I can't recognize or reconcile that nation that I see on these images with the one that welcomed my family decades ago, where grandmothers are arrested as they leave church, where children are forced into hiding out of fear that their parents will be taken away as they walk to school. The past year has been one of the most difficult in Global Refuge's 8-decade history. A wave of executive actions and policy shifts, including a stop work order that halted refugee arrivals for months, has fundamentally disrupted our ability to do the work of welcome. And candidly, I don't see that future changing any time in the near future. But I told you I was going to be Debbie Downer. I'm going to insert a note of optimism. But some things are changing. Across the country, even this week and weekend, in Arctic temperatures, people are standing up for their neighbors. They're rejecting, that's right, they are. They're rejecting not just the violence, but the notion that refugees and other immigrants are anything but intrinsic to the communities they call home. Some of you may have tuned in to hear Bad Bunny at the Grammys. You are hearing this voice that immigrants are not demons, they are not aliens, they are not criminals, they are humans. You are hearing that what we are seeing is what we have always known, that our newest neighbors make our country stronger, bolstering the workforce, the economy, the rich cultural fabric of our nation. And that is why I am so glad to be here with you today, because this moment demands the truth-telling, the moral clarity, and the courage. And because faith communities have always played a central role in that work, we're incredibly grateful for the partnership and the fellowship we have always received from the ELCA and from so many of you and your congregations. We could not do it without you. And I will tell you that in my darkest days in this past year, as I have had to deal with death threats and worry about the safety of my staff and our clients, it is some of the folks who have reached out. It is the notes from congregations and pastors and bishops that have kept me going personally. At Global Refuge, we've been doing this work of welcome for a very long time, since 1939, in fact. Founded during World War II, we began by resettling persecuted Lutherans fleeing the Nazi regime. Since then, we've responded to every major refugee crisis in modern history, welcoming thousands of Vietnamese refugees after the fall of Saigon, Cubans fleeing the communist takeover of their country, the lost boys and girls of Sudan, And more recently, we've been working with Afghan allies after the evacuation, Ukrainians seeking safety from the Russian invasion. No matter where families come from, our mission is the same: helping people rebuild a sense of home. For people of faith, this work is not abstract. We know that welcome is not optional. It is a commandment rooted in memory, humility, and love. Sometimes that means something very practical: finding a safe apartment, enrolling children in school, securing food and winter coats. Other times it means trauma-informed mental health support after someone has survived persecution or war. It's legal services when a family's legal status is threatened. It's helping a newcomer find a job that matches their skill set. Over the past 87 years, Global Refuge has supported more than 800,000 new neighbors. That number matters not because it's impressive, but because each one represents a real family, a real life, a real story of resilience. And I don't just say that as the head of an immigration services nonprofit, but rather as someone whose family has lived it. So I was born in Sri Lanka in 1979. My family was part of the ethnic and religious minority, and with the country on the brink of civil war, my parents sought refuge anywhere that would have us. At the time, Nigeria actually faced teacher shortages. So my parents actually had plane tickets in hand. Our bags were packed to move to Nigeria, and specifically northern Nigeria. What my parents didn't know at that time, I know some of you recognize Michelle Obama in my intro. We launched Let Girls Learn in part because of Boko Haram kidnapping 276 girls from Nigeria. We were moving to that general region. And at the time, that is when the news came that we'd received our visas to the US, just in the nick of time. And see, back then, American leadership meant offering refuge and opportunity to families like mine. Sadly, that promise is being tested these days. And I wonder, had my family tried to come today, would we still be welcomed? Fortunately, my parents were able to bring us here, and they came with no jobs, just $200 in their pockets and two very young kids in their arms. And we came to Baltimore because my dad landed a job with the Baltimore City public school system. And the school system and the community really adopted us. So it was the superintendent who found the basement apartment that we moved into. It was the school's vice principal who literally helped us move our bags in, who helped my dad set up a bank account. It was neighbors who babysat us as my mom was going for job interviews. It was churches and temples that donated winter coats to a family that had never seen a flake of snow. And now I get to pay that warm welcome forward because of this incredible blessing of leading Global Refuge. We see time and time again that immigrants and refugees don't just rebuild their own lives. They help renew and revitalize the community that welcomed them. They become teachers, healthcare workers, small business owners, caregivers, public servants. They fill workforce gaps, strengthen local economies, and help communities grow, not in spite of being newcomers, but because of the resilience and the drive that brought them here in the first place. Today, immigrants make up nearly 18% of the US labor force, even though they represent a smaller share of the overall population. And they are disproportionately represented in some of the most essential sectors of our economy, from healthcare to education to entrepreneurship. Just give you one example. In 2023, immigrant households earned $2.4 trillion, contributing nearly $420 billion in federal taxes and over $230 billion in state and local taxes. So when we talk about immigration and refugee policy, we are not talking about charity. We are talking about something that is doing the right thing and the smart thing. We are talking about whether the United States will continue to replenish itself with the talent and new ideas and recognize the God-given dignity, gift, and callings of people who are too often reduced to numbers, or whether we turn away the very people who have always helped this country be dynamic and competitive. So I see my family's journey as just one chapter in a much larger American story. And the question before us now is whether we will allow the next generation of stories like mine to be written, or whether we close the door just as these individuals reach it. So what has changed? And I guess some of you would say, well, what hasn't changed? So I want to be careful here because people can hold different political views, and there are some very legitimate questions about how a nation manages its borders and its security. But honesty also requires us to recognize that many of the changes of the last year have not been about improving order or security. Many of the changes have been about sowing fear and hate and showing cruelty. The truth is that there hasn't been a targeted effort to remove the so-called worst of the worst. Instead, we've seen an administration that prefers the sledgehammer over the scalpel, deploying a sweeping dragnet that's caught up more and more innocent families, including children. Most of us have seen all over social media and the news the heartbreaking images, not just out of Minnesota, but in relation to the two murders, but where federal agents detained a 5-year-old boy, Liam, standing outside in the cold with his little bunny hat and his Spider-Man backpack. Even though the family has an active asylum case, as we heard from his lawyers, and no removal order, he was sent to a Texas detention center. And this weekend, thanks to a federal judge implementing the law, he was sent, along with his father, to return home. Pikachu hat. Pikachu hat and bag in hand. But we can't be complacent. Some numbers say that there are about 3,800 children, including 20 infants, still in ICE detention. The changes of the past year haven't just been about removing people the administration doesn't think should be here. They've been about dismantling legal pathways that allow people to come to this country through safe, orderly, lawful processes. Last year on day one, the administration suspended the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, the bipartisan program long considered the gold standard of humanitarian protection. At a time when more than 123 million people are displaced worldwide, the retreat from leadership has had devastating consequences. We're leaving vulnerable people in harm's way. We're talking about Afghan women's rights activists, political dissidents from Venezuela, Congolese families fleeing civil war, persecuted Christians, and other religious minorities. To make matters worse, the White House has also announced that it will be scrutinizing the case of refugees who are already legally here in the United States. They were even arresting and deporting these refugees, some of them to out-of-state detention facilities. A federal judge, again, thankfully, just last week ordered that ICE stop arresting and deporting illegal refugees while court proceedings continue. The most important part of all of this is what it looks like on the ground. Families who believe they were finally near the end of a long process are suddenly stuck in limbo. Parents are separated from children by paperwork and policy shifts. Communities that were prepared to welcome newcomers are told, not now. And organizations like ours, built to do the work of welcome, are forced to triage. As people of faith, these realities compel us to ask hard questions. What does it say about us when children are treated as collateral damage? When fear outweighs compassion? We know God measures nations not by their power, but how they treat the most vulnerable. The deepest harm of the past year is not merely who was turned away, but also how many families learned that the United States could not be trusted to protect them or their neighbors. It's a painful lesson that will likely endure far longer than any single administration. So what are we doing about it? Despite these challenges, Global Refuge continues to serve families with everything we have. At its core, the work is ministry, meeting people where they are, tending wounds, and helping them take their next faithful step forward. I know Lutherans steer much of their ministry efforts by the concept of accompaniment, walking alongside those whom we desire to serve. I see Global Refuge as doing the same. We stand with immigrants through the work we do in the best of times, and we're with them even when the systems fail. As resettlement pathways narrow, our work has expanded, providing legal services, rent and food assistance, long-term integration support. We've also expanded our work to Guatemala and Mexico to support migrant youth who've been deported from the U.S., launching programs to help them find opportunities in their homeland so that they don't have to make the perilous journey to the southern border. In the meantime, we're not just rolling over. We also continue to advocate for policies that are lawful, humane, and workable, bringing data, experience, and moral clarity into rooms where decisions are often made far from affected families. That combination gives our advocacy weight with policymakers, and it's why our voice continues to matter even in difficult moments. So I want to end by asking maybe one of the most important questions that I hear on a daily and hourly basis, which is people who are saying, what can we do? So first, lead with truth, especially when disinformation spreads. The past year has shown what can happen when fear and fiction dominate the narrative. You don't have to be a policy expert to be a truth teller. You can see this on the PowerPoint slide. I myself am trying to be as active as I can on social media. Global Refuge also is on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Check out our website. You can see the QR code because we have some really excellent resources. Under our congregation resources, we have a service opportunities set of documents like packing our neighbor kits, liturgy resources, bulletin inserts, and so much more. Second, advocate with your values. Regardless of political party, insist that the United States uphold both security and humanity, that we can be a country with functioning systems and a moral backbone. Advocacy is an act of faith. It is one of the ways love your neighbor shows up in real life. And so on our website, you can sign up for advocacy, newsletters, our action alerts, so that you can stay up to date with policy changes and proposals and know when to call your representatives. Even this weekend, as we were hearing about the budget negotiations, there was discussions about cutting all funding for refugee resettlement. Third, your prayers matter. Prayer is not passive. Prayer shapes us, softens our heart, and reminds us of who we belong to and whose we are. Fourth, invest in stability. If you're in a financial position to donate, whether individually or perhaps through your church, this support allows us to directly assist those in our care. Financial assistance becomes groceries, rent assistance, childcare, legal services, and it provides real help at critical moments. And finally, share the success and value of Global Refuge with your congregations and communities. The more we build a groundswell of support for our work, the more we help our clients. These days, just reminding people how simple welcoming the stranger can be helps keep all of us from losing heart. So if you have the chance to talk to a neighbor or a friend at church or a business or someone at your book club, please tell them about our mission. Because here's the thing. Our mission isn't just about saving lives. It's about saving who we are. As we approach the 250th anniversary of the United States' founding, I find myself reflecting on the countless ways immigrants have shaped and continue to shape this nation. I think of the hundreds of thousands of families Global Refuge has helped to welcome who've proven what is possible when we open our doors and our hearts. And that's why Global Refuge's doors remain open, even as pathways to safety close. That's why we continue to adapt and innovate to serve refugees and other immigrants, why we strengthen privately funded programs and declare loudly that we still welcome. The immigration landscape is shifting, but our commitment and our mission to welcome remains steadfast. It won't be easy, but we're all doing it, and I'm asking you to help us to do it. I have seen how God works through communities of welcome, through the kindness of strangers, and through the courage of those who rebuild their lives in the shadow of loss. As Lutherans, people of faith, and just concerned citizens, your commitment to welcoming the stranger is not new. It's in your DNA. For decades, people of faith have stood at the front lines of compassion, opening doors and hearts to those seeking safety and hope. And at Global Refuge, we are deeply grateful to count you as partners in this holy work. Thank you for welcoming me today. But most importantly, thank you for living out the gospel in the way that you welcome your neighbors, especially the ones the world would sometimes rather forget. Thank you.